Alright, so let's get started. So, welcome to part 2 of Unit 7. I'm part of 5-5. You can feel free to apply if you want to and join us. Here's the feedback stuff. It's going to be at the end of the lecture. Disclaimer, I don't think we're going to be referring to period language. This was just from last time because of the use of the N word. I don't think yeah, it's not going to appear, I think. But if it does, there's this disclaimer. So don't be surprised. Expectations, as usual, be engaged with the lecture, be respectful. This lecture is recorded, so for those of you who want to go to the AP Chem lecture, yeah, the recording will be posted on the calendar. Um, I need to process both the first part and the second part, and that should be uploaded by tonight. Okay, so, oops. Agenda. This is what we covered this morning: imperialism, or the debates for imperialism, World War One, 1920s, the progressive movement, and we left off with the 1920s regarding the Coolidge. That was our last kind of administration that we were looking at, and that's going to segue us because into probably the more important part, the probably the most important part actually in this entire unit, and that's going to be regarding the New Deal in response to the Great Depression. And the reason why I say this is a good segue is, well, laissez-faire is going to continue under the Hoover administration and, well, economic depression. So let's get started with what mainly caused the Great Depression. A lot of people say the pinpoint, the start of all this entire mess is going to be in 1929 when we get the stock market crash. Now, what particularly happened at the stock market crash, you don't really need to know, but you just need to know that it really instigated a lot of bad stuff. For instance, prices for certain stocks were falling a lot. Some of them 90% of their original price. For example, U.S. Steel, I believe, dropped down to less than $100, and it was like around, I want to say $400, but I don't remember stock market history. That's besides the point. Another thing about the Great Depression is that it's going to lead to a lot of failures regarding banks. In fact, a third of our banks, around 50,000 of them, are going to be they're going to take the L, and a lot of Americans are going to be unemployed. In fact, 25% are going to face unemployment, which is incredibly bad. If you remember your macro econ stuff regarding the natural rate of unemployment, which should be less than 10%. Another thing is that farmers will be hit really badly, again, due to falling prices, so they're not going to earn much, but they're also going to be hit by the Dust Bowl, kind of environmental boo-boo. It's going to harm their production of crops in general. So that's combined with, the falling prices, things are not looking good for your average farmer. Now, finally, there was an attempt to respond to this. That would be the Smoot-Hawley tariff in 1930. That was supposed to be a solution. But what it did instead is it shrinks trade. There was retaliation from other countries as well, and it just made the whole thing worse for everyone. The Smoot-Hawley tariff is probably was the worst tariff enacted in U.S. history, but to be perfectly honest, we're kind of facing a similar thing right now as we speak, similar effects. So there's your bit of continuity there, I guess, or comparison. Now, during the Depression, Herbie Hoover didn't just sit there and do nothing. He did attempt some stuff, but he was under the belief of voluntarist responses will make this Great Depression go away. Basically, he didn't really want to interfere with the economy a whole lot, right? He's still a laissez-faire dude. But he will lay some groundwork that will be a little bit reflective of the New Deal. He will also kind of throw behind some of his support of some legacies of the New Deal. For instance, he will initiate the Hoover Dam as one of those public works. He will actually throw back a lot of support for the Glass-Steagall Act in 1933, basically limited commercial banks from messing around and finding out. We repealed that in the 80s, not 80s, in the 90s, I believe. Um, but that's unimportant. That's Unit 9. No one cares about that. He's also going to attempt to provide protections and subsidies for laborers and agricultural workers. He's also going to provide loans to private companies as well in 1932. But all of this is going to be too little too late. We're going to see the development of these Hoovervilles, right? A lot of people lining up just for these little meager pieces of food. Um, but that's where Roosevelt comes in. He wins the election of 1932. He's going in and he's going to give us a new deal, not to be confused with the square deal, which we discussed. Oh, I just realized Roosevelt. Oh, okay. So Roosevelt, FDR, is going to be the guy for New Deal. Now, the other Roosevelt, Teddy, is going to be the guy with Square Deal. And both of these guys have the 3 random letters. For Roosevelt, Teddy's case, it's the 3 C's. In FDR's case, from now on, I'm going to call him FDR instead of Roosevelt, by the way, to avoid confusion. We're going to see relief, recovery, and reform, the 3 R's. Now, generally speaking, when we talk about the New Deal, we split it up into the first New Deal and the second New Deal. So let's start off with the first New Deal. First New Deal is going to last from 1933 to 1934. It's going to consist of the first 100 days. It's going to give us a lot of alphabet administration things, the alphabet soup things like the Agricultural Adjustment Act, which is abbreviated to AAA, not to be confused with the insurance, whatever, the motor insurance company. Basically, it's going to boost prices for farmers to support them in dealing with the falling prices. The CCC, the Civilian Conservation Corps, are going to employ a lot of white single men for federal jobs. FERA, which is the Federal Emergency Relief Act, is going to give grants to states to fund their own workers, government workers. The NRA, not the National Rifle Association, but the National Recovery Act, I believe. It's either recovery or relief. I believe it's recovery. Will establish certain codes for setting prices and wages. It's going to give workers the right to organize. The FDIC, which should be the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, will guarantee individuals who deposit their money in banks that they will be repaid in the case that banks fail. That one is still around today. The Security and Exchanges Commission is going to provide federal oversight. Basically, they oversight the federal. And they are also going to regulate the stock market. As for the second New Deal, which kicks off in 1935 and ends in 1938 before World War II, we're going to see, additionally, the Works Progress Administration, basically employing Americans for public works projects, such as this mural I included here. I included a kind of satirical, little cartoon regarding the alphabet soup one. It was kind of a little funny for me. We'll see the Wagner Labor Relations Act, basically providing the right to form unions and to strike and all that. We'll see the Fair Labor Standards Act, basically establishing a minimum wage and restricting child labor. And finally, but certainly not least, it is going to be the Social Security Act, which will set up the Social Security Trust Fund. Now, I have a question for all of you who live in America. Do you know what Social Security is? Period language, basically racist slurs or anything that is archaic language. Yeah. It is still around today, even though some people are trying to gut it, right? You are basically kind of, quote unquote, investing into your retirement fund. So you put in some money into your Social Security, and in return, once you retire, you get those benefits after the age of 65, usually, because 65 is usually retirement age. Although some people do work beyond the age of 65, but that's not something I really want to kind of. Yes, that is correct. Both insomnia, cellular. So, okay, you guys have an idea of Social Security. This is actually pretty huge. Not just Social Security, but the whole New Deal. Why? Well, the federal government's going to be very well involved with the economy. And once again, we're going to see the expansion of federal power going on here. Which is why FDR is quite important in the context of government, but also U.S. history, because usually in U.S. history, we only care about significant presidents, right? Who cares about Millard Fillmore? Some people do, I guess. But he didn't really do much. FDR did a lot. Let's move on to kind of movements, the Union and Populist movement first. So, we will see the rise of the CIO, and hopefully you guys know that abbreviation because it's still around. They are going to conduct basically it's a bunch of unions. They're going to negotiate with the administration over legislation such as the fair. I believe they were involved in the Fair Labor Standards Act. I think they were also involved with FARA. I might be remembering that incorrectly. Too many abbreviations. You'll also see the rise of politicians such as Huey Long, who will actually criticize the Roosevelt administration for not doing enough. Huey Long is going to start this campaign called Share Our Wealth, and he's going to run with this campaign slogan, Every Man a King. He was very populist. He was from Louisiana, but unfortunately, he got assassinated in Louisiana, so we don't really know what he really would have done more as a senator. He was initially governor of Louisiana, succeeded to become senator. He doesn't really do much, but the fact that he exists will show that some unions and populists will view the New Deal as, hey, this isn't enough. Now, conservatives are going to be the opposite. They're going to think, hey, this is too much. And probably the biggest case of this is going to happen over Schechter Poultry Court v. U.S. in 1935. The Supreme Court's actually going to struck down certain provisions of the New Deal, specifically from the first New Deal. I believe it's under FARA, and they're going to rule it unconstitutional. This is going to be a pattern that repeats over and over, and FDR is going to get super duper frustrated. And eventually, he's going to make the worst political decision in his entire career, suggesting that we pack the court. So have more than 9 justices on the Supreme Court. This was incredibly unpopular, but he didn't really lose any elections. In fact, he won 4 of them total. So there's that. But understand that he was facing quite a bit of backlash from a lot of conservatives. In fact, we get a written document known as the Conservative Manifesto. I haven't actually read it. I might read it over the summer just to make sure that I am well versed with this whole movement, because this is only mentioned in reference to the Supreme Court, not any other kind of significant books or documents, which is kind of a little strange, but there's that. Now, no pictures for this slide because I couldn't find any fun pictures to make it look pretty. So let's talk about the legacy of reforms. Lots of these government programs are going to last. For example, you guys already know that Social Security still exists today. Whether or not it's going to exist after the AP exam, that's another question. But you will also see the importance of the Glass-Steagall Act. Remember, limiting commercial banks. This is actually going to be really huge in making sure that we don't take any L's. Unfortunately, we will take an L when we repeal it, and then later on, a lot of economic crap shows break out. For example, in 2008, the Great Recession happens because of a bunch of banks are messing around. We also get the Silicon Valley Bank. I believe that was 1 or 2 years ago. I don't remember. But in addition to that, you'll also kind of get the rise of Keynesian economics. Yes, basically the belief that the government should intervene in the economy by kind of, I don't know, tax them, like increase the taxes, decrease the taxes, increase government spending, or decrease government spending. And in this case, we did a lot of government spending in order to kind of recover. Some of you guys might be in macroeconomics. Other you guys have yet to learn this. You don't need to know the macro stuff behind this, but it's worth mentioning. In addition, from this, you'll actually get a kind of like a second wave of the Great Migration. A bunch of African Americans are going to leave the South again and move to these urban centers again. And you're going to actually see a very strong presence of African American community excuse me, African American communities in these urban centers, and they are going to be in a condensed. If they're condensed communities, you're going to actually have a pretty strong presence of a civil rights movement once that breaks out, which will be soon in World War II. Um, you'll also get a lot of Mexican immigrants going on here, coming in for these jobs as well. However, we are going to deport them, and if you guys remembered, in U.S. history, we invited Mexican immigrants to work, but we deported them at the same time. This is another instance of that during the Great Depression. Now, finally, I want to talk about the beginning of realignment. A lot of people talk about the party switch in the context of the Nixon era because Nixon adopted the Southern strategy. Basically, Republicans became even worse. Um, but, however, the beginning of this realignment, I would argue, comes from FDR, and even College Board actually wants you guys to acknowledge that. Why? Well, because of the New Deal programs under FDR, a lot of African Americans, a lot of immigrants, a lot of workers, unions are going to start voting Democrat in higher numbers because they believe that, well, if they get FDR in charge, he's going to continue doing all this stuff that's actually kind of helping us a lot. In fact, FDR is going to also work very closely with some of these individuals. For example, he's going to work with Marion McLeod Bethune. She will actually serve in the federal government as an African American woman. You'll also see Dionisio Chavez, who was a Mexican American senator from, I think, Arizona or New Mexico. I believe that area, which was predominantly Republican. However, he turns Democrat. You'll also get Fiorello LaGuardia, who is actually going to propose in a letter to FDR that we established kind of a new coalition to support this whole New Deal thing. So, from this moment on, from the New Deal, we are going to see kind of a new faction of the Democrats that's slowly going to encompass the entire party and make up the modern Democratic Party. Any questions about what I've discussed so far? Ayo, no macro stuff. Wait, what abbreviation? Abbreviation of the what? Oh, I thought I heard CIO. CIO is an abbreviation. Let me see if I can remember it exactly. It involved unions. Let me check up on that. I think it would be convenient for you guys to know. Nope, that is not what I was looking for. Should be abbreviated to CIO organization. Nope. Congress of Industrial Organizations. There it is. It's actually kind of related to the AFL, the American Federation of Labor. Some of them were formerly members of the American Federation of Labor, but that's not something you really should know. It's just a little trivia. Anything else? Glass-Steagall, you don't remember? Glass-Steagall basically limited the activities of commercial banks so that they wouldn't actually they wouldn't be in this volatile environment regarding the stock market. Because before, the commercial banks could like use your money technically, speaking, in like participate in these stock markets. And the stock market crash was one of the reasons why a good chunk of these banks failed. The same thing will happen actually in the Great Recession of 2008. And guess who started all of that? A Republican. So blame the Republicans. So there's that. Of course, now we do have some measures in place to ensure that some of these banks don't take that L, but still to this day, they do take that kind of L because the most recent we had, as far as I remember, is the Silicon Valley Bank. So, yeah, we live in fun times. All right. Looks like we have no questions, so let's move on to a short SAQ from the actual APUSH exam. This is a historian account. So yeah, read through these two passages, answer all of the prompts as best as you can. In hindsight, maybe this should have been after World War II, but it's good to limit yourself in some ways. But if you do have knowledge of World War II, feel free to use that as well for your responses. I will give you guys 15 minutes because it's a lot of text to read. So, yeah, feel free to ask me any questions. Yeah, right now it's 4-4. We'll regroup at 4:19. Let me check. It's postponed by 15 minutes from last I checked. It is starting soon, apparently. I don't know. Once you see Pyramidal in Lecture Channel 2, that's when they're starting. Dude, are you okay? Are you coughing? Do you need a cough drop? I don't have any.
Who, me?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. There's cough drops in the closet.
Okay, yeah, take them.
This is the last time I'm coming down.
Alright.
Come down and then I get sick right away. But I do have cough drops here.
Oh, good thing you got back sick after the show.
It's fine. It's really just it's not as bad as I've had before.
Oh, hold on. Someone asked me a question. Chicago is not in the South. Chicago's in Illinois. So Midwest area. How specific should your evidence be in the SAQ? Well, if you're talking about parts B and C, pretty specific. Don't be vague. But it does say event or development. No, you don't need to. You don't need to give any kind of like exact years. Just provide an explanation, description. Just show that you show me that you understand, or the AP reader that you understand what you are talking about. That's about it. And if you contradict yourself, well, you get no point. So there's that. Glibs asked, "What do you recommend for studying just in general? I didn't do good on the unit tests in my class, but I'm trying to review every day. I honestly would take a 3. I mean, usually in general, just like what I did was just like practice, writing for the most part. In terms of content, I don't really know what you're lacking. I can't really answer that in a solid way until I know what you're struggling with. So there's that. Other students, you can also chip in what you do for studying for this class. I barely studied. To be perfectly honest, I barely studied for this class because I did not care. Oh no, I just revealed that I am not a history major. Whatever will I do? People are still going to assume that I'm a history major. I did not take AP Bio. I am willing to learn the entirety of AP Bio if no one does AP Bio. But Sean is doing AP Bio. So I don't need to do AP Bio. Gotta cram all the Calc BC in 2 weeks, or should I pack it up? Buddy, I think you're kind of cooked. I don't know. I self-studied Calc BC very early in freshman year, and then took the exam with the class because it wouldn't give me credit. Yes, reading is mainly doing Calc BC. I think, to be perfectly honest, I think 2 of our lecturers who were working on Calc got overwhelmed. They got burnt out because of AP exams. So reading's the only person working on calculus in general. I can only do office hours with Calc. Even then, I'm so bored with Calc at this point. I'd rather have got people bring in analysis questions instead, because they're fun to talk about. Anyways, we have 9 minutes left, so halfway through.
Huh?
Stapling hard, losing the FRQs. No, if you're good at writing, then AP-ling isn't really difficult. Because that's really what it is. Making good choices, reading the texts carefully. That's all you really need to do on that exam. I think the harder part is literally just... We finally do have physics lecturers. Vivi and someone else, I don't remember who, are working on that. I mean, difficulty will vary on that argument FRQ. Yeah. Well, you have probably a little less than 9 minutes left. I'm gonna use this moment to go to the bathroom for a bathroom break. So, you guys keep on working on that.
There? Hello.
Hi, Connor.
Hi.
What's up?
Are you still in the car?
No, we just got in the house just a few seconds ago.
Okay.
What's up?
Anyways. Are those Sharpies still in the door?
Yes.
Okay, can you take them out and just set them somewhere, and then I'll have Colin pick them up, because he needed a Sharpie too.
Okay.
And it was either, he buys one, or we just borrow, or we just share them.
That's fine.
I think
I'll put him in an envelope outside when he comes.
Okay.
Will he be coming by today or tomorrow?
Tomorrow, probably on the way up there, so probably about 1ish.
Okay, I'll make sure there's...
No, not 1ish, probably noonish.
Okay,
Okay, bye.
bye.
Mike is still catching me. Okay. See a question about contextualization after I left. So follow the T format. Answer the prompt directly, provide your evidence, and provide your analysis of the evidence you state. Or ACE. There's that argument. whatever evidence. We have 5 minutes left, so 2/3 of your time have been eaten up. Anyone else still working on the SAQ? All right. Still waiting. 5 minutes. You still have time. Well, start yapping. Think. At least attempt parts A and B. C might be tricky if you don't haven't read on the New Deal that well. There is one detail I did probably did not talk about a whole lot on. That probably would make this a little easier for a lot of you. That's all right. Part C is probably the hardest. Yeah, part C is probably the hardest part for this SAQ particular. And we will talk about that one for sure. By the way, after this SAQ, we are going to speed run through World War II. We're gonna like rush through like crazy because I do not care about World War II. How many sentences? I usually don't quantify your responses. Sometimes just a single sentence will suffice. Sometimes 2 suffices. Sometimes 4 is not enough. It really depends on the quality of your writing. Rimu started self-studying, yeah. Unfortunately, Rimu told them that Unit 8 is not on the exam, when in fact, it is on the exam. So, yeah, it certainly is. Probably Unit 6. Unit 7 has some pop history behind it. A good chunk of them. So yeah. Alright, 2 minutes left. Whoever's working on it still, you got 2 minutes left. Start getting to your last few sentences. Try your best on part C. It's not exactly great. Strangely enough, these A-push exams have been giving me some readings that I might want to pick up over the summer. We'll see. Maybe it will make the quality of these lectures not topic to topic oriented because the CED is not that great. My personal opinion. In recent history, it's been going up a little bit. So around the 60% would now be like a 4 as of now. So there's that. Okay, we have 1 minute left, so I'm going to start reading through responses out loud. Cohen sees the New Deal as empowering workers and expanding government, while Katznelson, what a wild name, anyways, critiques it for reinforcing racial inequality through compromises with Southern white supremacists. Critiques is a little bit of an presumptive way of putting it. But you are technically touching on correctness. The Wagner Act of 1935, Wagner labor, yes, which guaranteed workers the right to organize and collectively bargain. This supported Cohen's argument because it demonstrated the New Deal's commitment to empowering the working class and promotes their economic interests through government intervention. All right. C. The exclusion of agricultural and domestic workers from the New Deal program supports Katzenel's argument. These jobs were mostly held by African Americans, and their exclusion shows how the New Deal failed to address racial inequalities, and in some ways worsened it. Good. One major difference between Cohen's and Katzenel's interpretations of the New Deal is that Cohen emphasizes how the New Deal expanded government support for the working class and improved labor conditions, while Katzenel focuses on how the New Deal reinforced racial inequality by accommodating segregationist Southern Democrats. Yep. The Wagner Act, I'm assuming you mean that. Yep. Exclusion of agricultural and domestic workers. From the Social Security benefits. Yes. Maintain that. Insomnia. Remove and sin, both good. Insomnia, while Cohen's interpretation suggests the New Deal focused more on the coalition in the North to suggest that the varied group is important to their success. The main focus of that text of Cohen is mainly on Chicago. This doesn't really, I guess, not really. The North part, not really. Katzenelson believed that the White South was equally important for structure. I feel like she's more emphasizing it a lot more, don't you see? Don't you think? So a little bit of you're walking a very fine line on part A. Part B, the New Deal started organizations such as Social Security, which is benefits connected to a welfare state. You need to explain how this would support Cohen's argument. C. FDR didn't directly attack the Southern systems of inequality, such as segregation, lending itself to the belief that the South was necessary to the party. That one, Part C, was actually a little bit closer to the point. Again, you'd have to close the loop there in order to really get that loop, to get that point confirmed. Kronzel, the answer C. A. Cohen is a more democratic interpretation because it's about Republican interpretation. Not quite. B. Work relief programs which provided jobs, if I remember. Such as what? You need to provide like a kind of development or something and explain how that would support it in key detail. Silly alert. Cohen interprets the New Deal as something that helped to uplift people of color, while Katzenelson was as a bystander to racist political influences. Yep, that's a good one. B. Ran out of time. Okay, I'm assuming you also ran out of time. C. Or something. Yeah, I'm eating while writing. Sorry. Sandwich. Oh, God. All right. So for the most part, I think a good chunk of you, if not all of you, understand their arguments and the major differences between them. So I think it's safe to say you guys understood part A. I feel like a lot of you will should have understood part B. We talked a lot about it, such as the Labor Standards Act, the Fair Standards Act, the Labor Relations Act, Social Security Act, a lot of those things. However, we didn't really talk a whole lot about Part C. So, yes, some people hit on good points because they remembered that. Some African Americans were excluded from these New Deal benefits. For instance, in the AAA, the Agricultural Adjustment Act, some African American farmers were purposefully excluded from the benefits of that. They did not get those boosted prices. Rimu hits a good point about Social Security. Not a lot of them uh, would get Social Security benefits as much as other workers. And the whole reason why this is the case is because the whole New Deal thing is going to be left up to states. That's the states' issue. They deal with these benefits, but they have to do that under per the federal law. Now they can these states can have two options. They actually do it for everyone, or they favor one group over the rest of everyone. As you might imagine, how the southern states will treat this, they'll pick choice two. Um, so yeah, in fact, this is one of the reasons why we kind of have to see Lyndon B. Johnson kind of close the loop with all this thing, because FDR will sign the GI Bill, but guess what? The GI Bill does not apply to African Americans, and well, guess what? Lyndon B. Johnson in Unit 8 is going to have to deal with that with his own Great Society program, which will actually give African American veterans an education. So there's that. Again, the GI Bill was also left up to the states, and the southern states are going to, do their thing with that, mess it up. Any questions about this SAQ? Part C was a little tricky, but I think parts A and B should have been good. So you would have gotten like 2 out of 3 points. That's not bad for the exam. Any questions on that? If not, we can move on to speed run through World War II, because I don't care for military history. Sorry, guys. Looks like we don't have any more questions, so let's move on to interwar foreign policy. What did we do between World War I and World War II? Nothing much, really. We are going to adopt the Good Neighbor policy. Basically, we are not going to do any kind of interventionist things. We're just going to be like your good neighbor. We're there. We want to make sure you're good and all. We don't really care about what's going on in your house. We are not going to intervene with that. That's your thing, not our thing. It's not our business. And this is actually going to be initiated by Herbert Hoover in Latin America. But Roosevelt's going to continue that policy. He's going to maintain relations with other leaders, such as Getulio Vargas in Brazil. This is a picture I included of such a meeting between the Brazilian president and the American president. But okay, that's great and all. But when World War II does kick off, the U.S. will not actually enter. It's actually going to keep its isolationist principles. It's going to stay neutral. America is going to pass the Neutrality Acts throughout the 30s. I don't remember which parts particularly. I do remember 1936 is one of them. Wait for a moment. But America will slowly start getting will start gravitating towards entering the war. Kind of the prelude to that will be the Lend-Lease Act of 1941, which basically lends, a bunch of weapons and equipment to Britain and China. Well, you might be wondering, why China? Well, Japan was kind of not treating China well. And when I say that, they were absolutely committing war crimes, and they have yet to apologize for it because they still deny those to this day. Historical revisionism isn't a great thing. Now, the U.S. is going to enter World War II officially in 1941 after Pearl Harbor, which was an overt attack by the Japanese Air Force on, the naval base of Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. Is going to leave some damages on the U.S. Navy. However, they're not going to be severe enough for the Japanese to win the whole Pacific Front because, well, we beat the Japanese, so there's that. Before I move on, do you guys have any specific questions about the interwar policy itself? Because once we jump into World War II, we are going to rush through that. By the way, for those of you who are in, am I cutting out frequently this time, or is it better than this morning? Okay, good. Um, it's better by a lot. Thank God. All right. Let's move on to World War II. We're going to talk about the home front and the military. So, World War II is actually going to be the one thing that will finally get us out of this Great Depression. I neglected to mention this. The New Deal is not going to fix the entirety of the Great Depression. We are still going to see some bad stuff. However, hold on. There we go. The World War II is going to force us to mobilize the economy, so to speak. We are going to establish strong industrial bases. We're going to have a lot of industrial jobs, manufacturing jobs, in order to support the war effort. And funnily enough, with the funding of the federal government, this is going to actually take us out of the Great Depression. So great news. Examples of companies throughout this time that provided a lot of jobs. It is, Marine ship, which will work on ships. Hopefully that's clear to you. But also Boeing, which is currently a clown show right now in every sense. But at the time they weren't. They were working on airplanes. Hopefully you guys know that, because in light of the recent news with Boeing, crafting really crappy 787s. Anyways, they provide a lot of industrial jobs for whom? Well, mainly women and minorities, aside from white men. For example, women are going to enter the war effort, as well as work in factories. We're going to see the rise of this character, Rosie the Riveter. I didn't include a photo of it, but if you guys don't know what Rosie the Riveter looks like in any of these posters, get out. You haven't even studied World War II. FDR is actually also going to pass the Community Facilities Act in 1942. Basically, it's going to allow women to go to these factories without worrying about the children at home. Basically, daycare legislation. Women are also going to serve as nurses in transportation, to do repairs, as engineers, and even as scientists during the Manhattan Project. We'll get to that. And another pretty instance of this is going to be the Women's Air Force Service pilots, or aka WASPs. I included a picture of such pilots here. They will also work in the auxiliary corps as well. As for the minorities, we will see, not just African American and Mexican American soldiers, a lot of people. Japanese Americans will also serve, Chinese Americans will also serve, because, this is a war against fascism. So that's going to unite a lot of people. Mexican Americans are going to come here through the Bracero program, basically a labor agreement between the American and Mexican government, so that the Mexican government will allow immigrants to go to America and to work in agriculture and transportation, mostly. Now, not hilariously, unfortunately, at the same time, the American government is also going to deport these immigrants at the same time. They are also going to initiate Operation Wetback after the war in 1954, which is a mass deportation program. But at the very least, these guys have the opportunity. Mexican Americans, African Americans, just a lot of groups as a whole will be able to participate in the war themselves. Because FDR is going to give this Executive Order 8802 in 1941. Do you need to know the number? No, but just know that FDR said, hey, no discrimination in the defense industries. And part of that is because he was urged to do so by a certain A. Philip Randolph. Now that segues us to debates on civil liberties. During World War II, African Americans, I'm going to talk about African American Yap again, are going to be a little bit doubtful about this whole war thing. See, African Americans are going to face segregation, discrimination, and while Americans are going to be on this whole, hey, we are here for democracy, equality for people, and African Americans say, yeah, sure. Don't lie to me, you idiots. So, in fact, even some African Americans will actually start to sympathize with the Japanese specifically. So, in response to this, a lot of African American leaders are going to say, hey, no, 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 no. We can fight for double victory, double V. We can protect democracy abroad by fighting, and we can preserve democracy at home for destroying segregation. And this is kind of the hallmark of the beginning of the civil rights movement in World War II. Now, does it make any much leeway? Not exactly, but it is going to convince a lot more African Americans to join the war effort as a whole, to prove to the American government that, yes, they are Americans themselves as well. Now, while serving in the war, they are going to experience segregation units. While working in these factories, they are going to experience discrimination in housing and segregation in workplaces. And some of them are still going to face, a lot of race massacres, such as the one in Detroit in 1943. Speaking of race massacres, Mexican American people are going to face a certain riot called the Zoot Suit riots. Don't ask me why they're called that. It has to do with the attire of Mexican Americans, the Zoot Suits. It's going to happen in 1943 as well. Even then, this is not going to be the worst part of kind of discrimination or challenges that minority groups marginalized communities will face. Japanese internment will happen. So, Executive Order 9066 in 1942 will force a lot of Japanese Americans into internment camps throughout the West. This is due on the basis of fear that Japanese Americans would be spies, even though a lot of Japanese Americans will end up serving in the military on the American side. Rather than the Japanese side, well, because fascism not great. This will be challenged by Fred Korematsu. Yes, his first name is Fred. In 1942, the case gets Supreme Court. It becomes a Supreme Court case in 1944, and we get our decision. It's a 6-3 decision in favor of the U.S. Basically, it was a military necessity for those internment camps. So again, another defeat on the sides of civil rights for Asian Americans. However, a lot of these Japanese Americans are going to have their convictions released. We are going to get the Civil Liberties Act in 1988, and we are going to get a formal apology from the federal government for all that. And there will be some kind of repayment under executive order under Gerald Ford, which is the only good thing I guess he did. Any questions about the home front side of things? I love women. Well, you should, because they're important. Any questions about this? If not, we can move on to the military aspect. I'm not going to talk about the military history because it's not interesting to me, or for the A-Push College Board thing. What's fascism? Oh, so it's this. Do I really need to explain this? It's an ideology. Okay, I guess. All right. No, because it's like a very depressing thing to talk about. Okay, your teacher did not go. Okay, that's a valid question. I completely forgot. You're the one with the bad teacher. Fascism is very far right. It is authoritarian. It is very ultra-nationalist in nature. It is an ideology particularly characterized by a dictator, such as Adolf Hitler, or Benito Mussolini, or Hideki Tojo in Japan. There's militarisms. There was enforced suppression of a lot of people. So there's that. Examples of fascists. Hitler was a fascist. We call him a Nazi. Nazi is kind of a way of fascism. Mussolini is also going to be a fascist. And fascism is actually going to be a reaction to the rise of communism and socialism throughout Europe. Yes, fascism equals Axis. The entire Axis was fascist. Francisco Franco, you can also consider as a fascist as well. We also had fascists in the Americas, I believe in the Dominican Republic as well. We also had our own fascist movement here, actually. We had the kind of a Nazi party thing going on during the interwar years. I'm not joking, by the way. Look it up. Look up the Madison Square Garden rally, and you'll see how fascism worked in that area. And you might be able to connect the dots between that and... I'm not going to make it very clear for you guys. I think you can read the room. Anyways, hopefully you understand the fascist ideas. Very oppressive, all that, dictators, blah, 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 blah. And communism, of course, is going to involve dictators as well, such as Stalin. But we are not going to engage in an outright war against communism, because the communists are also going to be fighting against the fascists. All right. Let's just move on very quickly to military, the views of the war. A lot of Americans are going to support the war in response to, again, fascism, which I explained, but also to to a lot of war crimes conducted by the Axis powers. For example, the Holocaust. A lot of Americans are going to see the aftermath of the Holocaust, all these mass killings of not only Jewish, but also disabled people, LGBTQ people as well. And they are going to be certainly horrified because it's a horrifying scene. They're also going to be very angry, so to speak, about Japanese war crimes. For example, a certain unit in Japan that will do certain things in a certain city in a certain country, China. They are going to do a lot of rapes. They're going to conduct a lot of, inhumane testing and all that. Not only the Japanese, but also the Germans as well. This is going to spur Americans to really support the war a lot more. Now, as for the Americans in the war, they were very well involved as opposed to World War I. World War I, they joined in 1917, and the war just ended like a year later for them. This is a war they are very involved in. They are going to be involved in the Pacific Front. They're going to be involved in Europe. They are going to actually put up a lot of fights. For example, in the Pacific, they're going to they carried the Pacific. They did a lot of island hopping campaigns. Guadalcanal in 1942, Battle of Iwo Jima, and then eventually, the atomic bomb. In addition, with Europe, they are going to be well involved. Eisenhower specifically is going to be well involved in organizing D-Day in 1944. And after the success of D-Day, Europe's going to pretty much fall into the hands of the Allied powers again. In addition, minorities, I already mentioned that they will also serve in the military. For example, code talkers, Navajo people will serve in intelligence. Women will also serve in the intelligence community. African Americans will serve in all black units. Probably the most famous example is going to actually be the Tuskegee Airmen, who were able to shoot down 8 out of 28 German air fighters shot down in Italy during that campaign. We will also see Japanese Americans serve in the All Nisei unit, mainly an intelligence unit as well. So there's that. Finally, I want to talk about technology. The military is going to be very involved in military research, technological research. Probably the most famous example is going to be the Manhattan Project, will involve both Oppenheimer and very limited Einstein. So there's that. But throughout the war, we're going to actually see rise of some things such as the blood bank. Well, I know, what a radical idea, a blood bank. We're going to see the Norden bomb site as well that will be able to shoot down these incoming bombs, quite more easily. Funnily enough, most of the technology that the military funds will eventually come to us as household appliances or daily stuff. For example, a good chunk of your appliances were also manufactured by companies that are very well involved in military industries. Don't ask what General Motors was doing. Anyways, any question about the U.S. military? I'm getting radio silence. I think this is actually fairly straightforward, so I guess we can move on to our last topic. Post-war diplomacy. This is a very short topic. Basically, you got to know what visions were going on among the winners, the Allies. Specifically, the US, the UK, and the USSR. All of those have abbreviations, I guess. So, what they're going to do is they're going to meet up in a series of conferences. They're going to meet in Yalta, which is in modern-day Ukraine, I think. At least it used to be. They're also going to meet in Potsdam, Germany, to discuss kind of what the world would look like after, how they divide up the world in some ways, and that's going to actually be in part of the negotiations regarding Germany. We're going to get to that in Unit 8 because we're very close to the Cold War, but not yet. But one of the most important things that will come out of post-war diplomacy is the UN. This was a very huge vision of FDR. He never came to see it through. Truman will finish that vision in the negotiations. Basically, the UN is going to be a continuation of the League of Nations. This time, it's not going to fall apart easily. It's still around. Hopefully, you guys are aware of that, because, that would be in the news if it fell apart. Do you need to understand the exact structure of the UN? No, but I'm going to tell you guys some general things about it. So, we have the Security Council. It's going to consist of 5 countries: the US, the UK, France, Russia, and China. Which China? Don't ask me that question. It's a little complicated. Eventually, it's going to be the People's Republic of China now. But which China it was actually too much debate. Again, we'll talk about that later in Unit 8. The Security Council was permanent members. Now, the Security Council has, I believe, 2 open slots. I don't remember. I didn't do MUN. I don't really care for the UN. And every now it's like a rotation. But the permanent members of the Security Council are the 5 allied powers for the most part. There's going to also be the Secretariat. What that does is basically to ensure that the UN remains efficient. There's the General Assembly, which is everyone who is part of the UN that is recognized by the UN and participates in all this kind of suggestions. That's all it does. It makes suggestions. It's not a binding decision. They make resolutions and all that. And of course, there's the International Court of Justice, which is centered in The Hague, Netherlands. And what it does is it brings, it hears on international crimes, specifically war crimes. And if you guys have never heard of the ICJ, then you probably have not been looking at the news regarding the Israel-Palestine conflict. But again, that's a modern-day example of the ICJ in action. It's been kind of doing its thing throughout world history for the most part. So there's that. Now, I do want to mention that after World War II, the U.S. is going to become a global power. Why? Well, the European powers literally just had a very destructive war. If you've seen any photos in the aftermath of World War II, you'll understand that the UK, France, Germany, Italy, a bunch of other European countries are going to not be in a good position. They are going to struggle with boosting their economy, with rebuilding everything. And so what's the aftermath of all this is just going to be the US and the USSR, and this is going to be the setting for our Cold War when we move on to Unit 8. Before we move on to our last activity, are there any questions about all this? Except for the UN. I do not care for the UN. Neither does College Board, technically. Looks like that's a no, so let's move on to an LEQ. Good luck. So, in response to this, this is 1900 to 1970. We stopped at 1945, but you can address 1945 to 1970 if you want any feedback on that, on your understanding there. Write a full intro paragraph, full contextualization and thesis, and then write what evidence you would use, and also write why. Do not write full body paragraphs, only just the full intro paragraph. You should have at least minimum 2 pieces of evidence, because that's the thing that gets you the points. So yeah. If you have any questions, you have 20 minutes, by the way. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me. I'll be around, hopefully, in the next 20 minutes. Um, we'll see. In terms of migration, internal migration, yes, the Great Migration is going to be the most important thing to look at. Remember that this prompt is asking about evaluate the relative importance of causes of internal migration. You have around 10 minutes left, estimate. Um, a little bit more than 10 minutes. So halfway done. You should have a general idea of what your intro paragraph should look like. So hopefully you are working on your evidence. If you're doing backwards, if you already have all your evidence and all that, and you know what your thesis might look like, you're in a good position. We're a little under 10 minutes. How are we looking right now? All right. And get an idea. Are you guys working on your evidence right now? Are a good chunk of you working on your evidence? Deciding on what you're gonna yap about? How long should the evidence be? You should have at least 2 pieces of evidence. Just state what the evidence is and then explain why you would use that evidence for your argument. Explain how it, very briefly, as brief as you can. Don't write an entire body paragraph. right, 2 minutes left. Looks like I got a response. I'm gonna probably just read through it now to save time. Hmm. All right, it's 5-9. Wrap up your thoughts. Post your responses if you're working on this. Reading through Mimu's response, you have a pretty good thesis. Now, I don't know where your contextualization was supposed to be. Is it the era saw the rise of industrialization all the way down to the end of it? Or because I don't know where you started yapping about your evidence. You're eating ice cream. Right. I hope you get brain freeze. That was a joke. That's your excuse. Ayo. Okay. I'm just gonna assume this part is your contextualization. Um. Is it? I don't know. It doesn't really look like your contextualization, but it also does. But it's kind of confusing because it kind of seems to be going into your evidence. It looks like it's going into your evidence. So I guess you are not doing context from the looks of it. Okay. But I think your explanation of the evidence is quite good. So there's that. Let's take a look at COE. I think that's the last LEQ I'm going to look at because no one else posted an LEQ. Internal migration caused by racism and economic opportunity greatly impacted America from 1900. Okay. Following the growth of industrialization, many people African American moved to urban areas for work. Strict segregation also played a major role in the Great Migration. This last part, strict segregation laws and racial violence. Dig into that a little bit more in the context of economic opportunities. Also, in regards to industrialization, there's a possibility that you could also mention certain wars, jobs, and all that. That might be good as well. The Industrial Revolution is before the 1900. And I think you're talking about the modern Industrial Revolution, the second Industrial Revolution. So there's that. Jim Crow laws is in that period, so there's that. But you don't really explain thoroughly. Okay. You were trying to be brief. You're a little bit overly brief with the Jim Crow part. Your Industrial Revolution is actually outside of the period. So there's that problem. The main point of this LEQ was to focus on how wars would contribute to such internal migrations, such as the Great Migration. Um, and a lot of you talked about economic opportunities, but you also mentioned that racial discrimination and inequalities in the South would lead to such internal migration from out of the South with respect to African Americans. Um, you probably just need to, all of you should look at um, the influences, compare the influences, I guess, of such economic opportunities. Explain how World War I creates these economic opportunities for African Americans, and make your judgment whether or not that is actually relevant um, in any way or important in any way. Same thing about racial segregation and Jim Crow stuff. Um, so not the Industrial Revolution itself, but more so the the rise of urban centers and urbanization. Um, does that make sense for all of you? Remu hit on good points for this LEQ. So there's that. Yes, this is. I think from the last LEQ, from what I remember, it is. It was more specific, and I like it. Yes. All right. So that's the end of the lecture then. So there's this feedback thing. Any questions before we go on to looking a little bit through the CED, unless you guys don't want me to go over the CED itself? It's a little bit of a clown show in some ways. You all know how much I don't like the CED sometimes. All right. Screen recording will be in the lecture calendar. If any of you guys have that link up right now, feel free to post that. I'll go through with it. All right. Let me exit out of this. That. Oh wait, no, I have the thing. I'm just gonna screen share and show you what the calendar looks like. Before I move on with the CED, hopefully we'll get to go through this quickly. All right. Can you guys see my screen? This is the ending screen for this. Okay, cool. So the lecture is going to be posted here, if it would load. There it is. So all of this, it's going to be posted under the A push section. Oh, all of this is going to be posted under the A push section. Oh, someone canceled their lecture. So there's all this. I'm going to mark this as completed. And that's where it's going to be posted. Let's move on to the CED. Let's speed run through all this fun stuff. So the first unit is on debates over imperialism. Ignore these optional sources; they're just a bunch of reading things. Basically, understand the reasons why imperialists supported, imperialism, and why anti-imperialists did not support imperialism. Hopefully, you guys can come up with this one a lot more than this one, because a lot of people talk about this part more. But if you can understand the moral kind of ideas behind this, then it's good. All right? Do you have any questions on specific examples of this? Link in the chat. Lecture recordings. Okay, sure. Hold on. Let me just... Calendar. Scroll down all the way to the bottom, because that's where A push is, because U.S. history is... It's in alphabetical order. All right. Cool. Let's move on to the Spanish American War. You don't really need to know how it happened. I just like to give you that context. You need to know the territories we got out of it, as well as what we had to deal with in the aftermath. So you need to know that we got Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines, and we're going to have to deal with the Philippine American War after that, 1899 to 1902. At the end of World War II, what's the most important event of Unit 7? The Potsdam Conference, for the most part, yeah. Because this is going to set the stage for the foundation of the UN and everything, and the Cold War as well. So there's the Spanish American War, see? Very tiny. The progressive movement. This is a beefy movement, beefy topic. So you need to know what progressives fought for. You need to know who, how they kind of fought for it. So muckrakers, this is what they're referring to here. You need to know that there was a dark side to progressivism based on segregation and eugenics as well, mainly because of Woodrow Wilson's fault, because the guy is an absolute ass. I do not care if I said that out loud. He is, and it's a fact. You guys should know that. You should write that down on your A-Push exam. Woodrow Wilson sucks, and you'll get full credit, I promise. Joke. He is, though. We'll see the passage of legislation as well as amendments that will deal with progressive issues such as suffrage, most important. Prohibition will be part of the progressive movement as well, and women will actually be important in the role of getting this prohibition passed, but also in anti-prohibition once they realize that prohibition, it ain't working out too hot. He also, this is explicitly mentioned, preservationists and conservationists. You need to understand the difference between the two, and understand that they kind of shared a common goal with, natural resources and national parks. So yeah, here's a bunch of examples. You don't need to know every single one of these. Okay, World War One. We remained neutral for a good chunk of it, for 3 years. Then we entered the last year, 1917 to 1918. Lusitania and the Zimmerman telegram are going to get us into that war. Yes, I mentioned that they played a limited role when I was talking about World War II. And we never ended up ratifying the peace treaty with World War I. We never joined the League of Nations because, well, Congress did not like did not like one provision in the Treaty of Versailles, or like the fact that we were getting involved with European affairs. Isolationism here is a big thing. So there's that. Let's move on to the home front. We had a first Red Scare in reaction to radicalism and immigrants. This is gonna lead to an attack on labor leaders such as Eugene Debs, and also as immigrants who were believed to be sympathizers to communism or socialism. We are going to try to deport a bunch of Polish immigrants and Jewish immigrants through the Palmer raids. Immigration. We're going to get a lot of immigration from South and Eastern Europe, and Asia. And nativists are going to react to this by trying to get quotas that will restrict immigration, and they will succeed, such as the Immigration Act of 1924. So there's that. Through this, we will get our kind of first great migration going on here, right? Most of African Americans are going to move away from the racist South to the less racist North and West, where they could get jobs in urban centers. Most people will migrate to that, not just African Americans. This is a result of the fact that a lot of men were fighting abroad and there were job openings everywhere. So there's that. Oh, yeah. 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre. I might have said 1923. It's 1921. So there's that. Roaring 20s. Technologies. Pretty much just understand the assembly line and its role, mass production and consumption in general. The rise of radio and telephones and cinema are going to spread national culture, like, cinema itself, but also jazz is going to be a thing as well. It's going to be widespread. So there's that. NBC is also going to start existing. Fun fact. Cultural and political controversies. There were, this part is I hope it's a no-brainer for you guys. This part after World War One, yes, there was the whole anti-immigration thing. And in fact, take a look at this. This is literally just a copy and paste from before, from one of our previous topics. And here we're going to look at rise of art, culture. So the Harlem Renaissance, we're going to see the rise of ethnic identities. Black is beautiful. Well, not exactly. Black is beautiful is going to be like late 20th century in the modern day. But this is going to be like the predecessor to Black is Beautiful movement. African Americans are going to invoke their identity in a lot of ways in literature and art. 20s, we're going to have a lot of debates about various things, about gender roles, about race, the rights of people, as well as the religion, the modernist versus fundamentalist controversy in the Scopes trial, which is the only specific thing I talked about. If you guys ask me why I don't go through the entire thing, it's because of this huge list of various things that you could look at, and no, just no. You guys don't have the time for that. Great Depression. We didn't really hit on this part. This is kind of not important because it's already been mentioned before in the Roaring Twenties. This one, this will make sense. I explained this. This is literally the stock market crash in 1929. Policymakers, there's this. The attempts of Herbert Hoover to address the Great Depression, which will not be largely successful. So we're going to get the New Deal. There's this. It's not really, absolutely important. There's this, though. So conservatives in Congress and Supreme Court are going to limit the New Deal, while unions and populists are going to push Roosevelt towards that. So yes, Huey Long is going to do that. The CIO is going to do that, while the Supreme Court and the conservatives are just going to, limit all this. Yes, it left a legacy of reforms, but it did not end the Depression. World War II pulled us out of the Great Depression because we did a lot of government spending, Keynesian economics. Yes, and political realignment. African Americans, working class communities identified with the Democratic Party more, and we're going to eventually solidify the party switch by the Nixon era, which is again in Unit 8. This, another kind of migration thing. If you don't know, I didn't mention the TVA, Tennessee Valley, administration. That's not important. Into foreign policy, let me just check up if there are any questions. I'll quote you. Do not quote me. Interwar foreign policy, pretty tiny. Basically, select intermilitary to promote isolationism. They just focused on isolationism. That's the whole point of the good neighbor policy. However, Americans are going to take a look at the fascist stuff and going to think, yeah, not a big fan of that. And then Pearl Harbor is going to draw us out of neutrality into World War II. You need to know that World War II picked us out of that. It was of the Great Depression, mainly because we needed a strong industry base to support the war effort. So there's that. A lot of women and minorities served in their either in the war, but also will work in these factories, factory gaps. And we're going to see a lot of migrations throughout, not only just immigration, but also just migrations to urban centers. Internment of Japanese Americans is explicitly mentioned. So there's that. Yeah, a lot of examples that I am not willing to go through. Military, you should understand the American views of all this, why they believe that this war was important to them. You should take a look at kind of these women and minorities in the military, as well as taking a look at a little bit of the military history, not a whole lot. I'm not a big fan of all this here. It's too much military history. So American views of the war, you should know that they just hated fascism. The way this war was done, technological and scientific advances is the one thing. Norden. This last part here is probably more significant than just the pop history stuff here. And finally, post-war. This see how small it is. It's literally just one development. Okay, the U.S. is dominant and major power. It's one of the most powerful nations, probably the most because the USSR is pretty weak economically. So yeah, the reason why is World War II is going to leave a lot of countries in Asia and Europe devastated. So that, and then Potsdam Conference. All right. Any specifics? Any questions about the CED itself? Oh, he was dead. All right, cool. In that case, we are done here. We're gonna leave off. I will have my office hours at some point at 6. So if you have any questions from units 1 to 7, I will try my best to answer them off the top of my head. You guys have priority as APUSH students over the AP Gov and AP World students because, my job is literally APUSH. So there's that. Bring questions about the exam itself or just the content. So yeah, feel free to join us then. I know it's a little late for 9 p.m. for some of our East Coast people, but I had no choice. I wanted to have that after Unit 7, so yeah. All right, I'm going to leave it off here. Thank you so much for coming. Let me end the recording real quick.